Good evening, Prince Buthelezi. Thanks very much for your time. We did try to get from Teboho some specifics. We asked her whether there were specific comments that you perhaps once made which made her put you in the category of people who are not helping in the fight against xenophobia. She didn't respond except to say she has received a letter from your lawyers which she will be responding to.
Correct, I have. I've given her 3 days, and 3 days have expired, and I've got options. Because it's really apocryphal that I've ever in my life made any xenophobic statements. In fact, I think the whole of South Africa watched me on the SABC on the day I went up to Johannesburg. What happened actually is that Minister Cele sent Mr. Blessed Gwala to tell me that some of the people who were running away after looting the shops of our brothers from the rest of the African countries were seen running towards JP hostel. So then he then said that he wanted to hold a meeting there with the Indunas and the people. Because how strongly I feel about this, I offered to him that I was going to join him to quell, those tensions. So, in fact, this is not the first time. In 2008, I even went to Alexander Township and other places. In fact, as a result of my intervention in 2008, the Patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church, the Patriarch of Alexandria and all Africa, conferred on me the order of Marcus, which is St. Mark's. And when he conferred it, among other things, he said that he had seen me consoling a Mozambican woman, wiping off her tears. And he said that he felt, for other reasons, but even for that, he felt that they should honor me with their order in the church. I'm an Anglican. I'm not even belong to the Greek Orthodox Church. And before that, too, when this occurred, I also went up to quell these fires. Now, I was surprised then when the minister then sent another message to say that as a result of the intervention of Minister Mkhize, who apparently was sent by His Majesty the King, to say that the King took exception to him dealing with these Indunas. That was the King speaking. And he said for this reason, he felt that the thing was getting political and that therefore he would no longer go. But I felt so strongly, and because, of my ties, with Africa and what Africa has done for this country and what they've done for me personally, even important figures in Africa, such as the giants, such as Dr. Olusegun Obasanjo, I felt strongly that I should proceed with the meeting. I sent a message through Mr. Gwala and our leaders in Gauteng and went up there. And the meeting was rowdy because the police informed us that there was a group that was very rowdy, but not everyone, which was very rowdy, which was moving up and down and not listening to what I was saying. And whenever I mentioned our brotherhood with African countries, they would actually, howl at me. So anyway, I was able to finish my speech. Now, I would like Ms. Teboho Moshati to actually quote just one instance where I ever made any statement like this. I've already received a letter of appreciation from the former head of state of Nigeria, Dr. Obasanjo, a very long letter in which he compliments me for that intervention. And he actually makes a very interesting statement. Here is the letter, dated the 12th. He says that anyone who can tell him that there's no xenophobia in South Africa today can deny that my mother is a woman. That's how he feels about it. the whole of Africa is outraged by what we're doing here, because we're going to end up as the polecat, not only of Africa, but of the whole world.
What do you think?
Just yesterday,
what do you think we can do to make sure that the scenes we saw in parts of Gauteng the other week never happen again?
And now we do this to their people.
How do we make sure that the scenes we saw in parts of Gauteng the other week never happen again? What needs to be done?
No, I'm not prepared to come here. I'm coming here to talk about Mangosuthu Buthelezi. I'm not prepared now to involve myself about the king. He must tell me an occasion where I and the king, either together or individually, made statements like that. I'm here to defend my honor and my name, my standing in Africa, which actually is quite high. Well, I've come here to defend my name.
Well, we'll see how she responds to the letter that your lawyers have written to her. But what do you think we need to do as a country and as a nation to stop the scenes that we saw the other week from happening again?
Well, in fact, in the letter, that the former president of Nigeria has written to me, he actually makes suggestions that this is the time for damage control. And he suggests in the letter that maybe for this time immediately, the government needs to send envoys to apologize in many countries in Africa, which is exactly what our president, Mr. Ramaphosa, I believe, is doing for now, but that is just for now. In fact, I've received many letters, and even one from one Nigerian who is doing a doctorate at WITS, who admits that he's undocumented and says that I must help him. I've referred the letter to the Minister of Home Affairs to consider it, because I have no authority. Although I was Minister of Home Affairs and have dealt with this matter over 10 years, for more than 10 years, when I was Minister of Home Affairs under President Mandela and also under President Mbeki, I've never, actually uttered any statement about my brothers in Africa that they deserve the kind of terrible treatment, the dastardly actions of South Africans that they've unleashed against our own people. And I think I'm ashamed as a South African of what is happening. That's why I would like this lady to quote me just one statement that I ever made. She must quote just one statement.
Well, she said she's promised to respond to your letter. Now, you're no longer the president of the IFP. How does it feel?
Yes, no, I'm no longer the president of the IFP.
Yes, how does it feel?
In fact,
this is a party you established a long time ago. You were its only leader throughout the years. How does it feel for you personally?
Pardon?
Do you feel relieved?
What is the question? Of course, most definitely, because it's not as if I was actually clinging on the position. As long ago as 2009 and before that, I wanted to, and then 2011, it is known that some people financed our chairman, Ms. Zanele Makwaza Msibi, to split our party. Then, even when I wanted to leave, then the party felt that I should assist them, to get the party, to its state, to a stable state. And I felt that I'm not a coward, I'm not a descendant of cowards, and that I would do what the party wanted me to do. And I think that the results of the election this year make me to live with a clear conscience that I've left the party, which has now become the opposition party in KZN. I've left the party in a strong position.
Now, we are only 4 months into the new parliament's 5-year term. Now, having stepped aside as the party's leader, are you planning to stay on as an MP until the very end, till 2024?
Certainly not. This may be my last session, in fact. You know, no, there's no question about that. I'm not going to stay here for 5 years. What for, actually? I'm not going to do so.
What would you say has been the IFP's single biggest contribution to South Africa?
Well, actually, I'm not, as Americans say, in the habit of blowing my own horn. I think that the people of South Africa can judge me as far as that is concerned. But as far as I'm concerned, I live with a clear conscience. I think that when my leaders, Mr. Oliver Tambo and Inkosi Albert Luthuli, sent Mr. Clopas Nsibande, who was an interim leader of the ANC in Gauteng, to talk to my sister, who was married to a doctor, Dotwana, in Davidton, in Benoni, not far from Wattville, where Mr. Tambo was, to say to them, although our movement, the ANC, was totally against the Homelands policy, they were begging me now that they were pressurizing us to comply with the law. That they prefer that I should be the one who leads it. That if Amakosi and delegates to the conference that the department actually arranges, you know, for an election, if they elect me, they said I must please forget about the fact that our policy as ANC was against it. So I did that. And so in '74, when I was invited in Addis Ababa during the lifetime of Emperor here, Haile Selassie, with Mr. Tambo, to debate the issue of economic sanctions against South Africa, I actually decided to visit President Kaunda and President Nyerere to thank them for giving sanctuary to all our exiles of all political parties. Then it was during that visit that Dr. Kaunda said to me, I must visit the offices of his party, UNIP, which I did. And he said, after that, I must come back to State House. I did. He then said to me, he and other frontline leaders appreciated that after Sharpeville, when our leaders were in prison, when our others were banned, others were in exile, and no one was saying anything, they appreciated that as soon as the Zulu people elected me, I deliberately took the government at their word that they were saying that I'm the head of a government, and I spoke strongly, to the extent that in 1971 I was invited with Inkosi Mangosuthu by President Banda to Malawi to celebrate their independence. And during that visit, I was told by one of the ministers, Aleke Banda, that Dr. Banda had arranged for me and Mr. Tambo to meet. And Mr. Tambo's message, single message then, was that he said to me that he feared that I was rocking the boat too much here, to the extent that he said that Mr. Mandela was in jail, and he said that he feared now that the way I was going, they were going to definitely take action against me. Then subsequent to that, that visit, then Dr. Kaunda said to me, what I'm doing is not sufficient. He said, I must reignite mobilization in South Africa by getting a membership-based organization. So I said to myself, how do I do that when I'm a member of the ANC? So I consulted my leader, Mr. Oliver Tambo. So Mr. Oliver Tambo said, I must go ahead, I must do so. So then, that's how Inkatha actually was formed. It was actually formed, structured on the ideals of the African National Congress as propounded by the founding fathers in 1912 on non-violence and non-negotiation. So after that, we met with Mr. Tambo in many places. In fact, in 1976, when Transkei celebrated independence, inaugurated rather, during the inauguration of independence in Transkei, the same former president of the Republic of Nigeria, sent a ticket for me, for my wife Irene, for 2 aides. On the day Transkei became independent, I was speaking at the Institute for International Affairs in Lagos because he didn't want me to be in the country. Later, he explained to me why he did that. Because President Obasanjo came to this country as one of the eminent persons group of the Commonwealth. And during that visit, they wanted to see Madiba in prison, but they were not allowed, but he was allowed. Then at the time, the only person who was speaking was myself. So he said that he was curious and asked Madiba that, who is this Buthelezi that is saying, is still speaking like this? Madiba said, Comrade Buthelezi is a freedom fighter in his own right. So that even this year, when he turned 82 in February, I went to Nigeria to deliver a lecture in celebration of his birthday. And I also was invited by the king of the Angonis in February. And of course, I went to pay my respects to President Kaunda. And President Kaunda again made a statement saying that he thanks me for listening to him and other frontline states because they had consulted with Comrade Tambo, that the only way to reignite mobilization was by me forming Inkatha.
Now, in 1973, you attended a conference in...
I aborted the Homeland Policy. I aborted the Homeland Policy because the area called KwaZulu was never a Bantustan. It never. In fact, I mobilized people of all races in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and we ended up with the KwaZulu-Natal Joint Executive Authority, which involved all the races. By 1994, KwaZulu was not operating by itself, but together with what was called the provincial administration. So that mission, which I was sent to accomplish by my leaders, I accomplished. And therefore, I'm happy that I did accomplish that mission.
Now, Oliver Tambo's biographer corroborates
not only the citizenship
aspects of the...
But I saved the citizenship of all African people who are now foreigners in the rest of South Africa, those who are taking independence.
Now, Prince Buthelezi, the Oliver Tambo's biographer corroborates some, aspects of what you have just said. But where did your relationship with Oliver Tambo break down?
You know, we met Mr. Oliver Tambo many times. You know, after forming Inkatha with his approval, which I would not have done if he didn't approve, I wanted to publish, a publication for Inkatha. So I went to Sweden, and there's an organization financed by government called SIDA, to ask for money. Then Dr. Ernst Machanek, who is the CEO of SIDA, said, the only organization they deal with is the African National Congress. And he said that they can't now deal with another organization from South Africa. And he said that, of course, unless Tambo agrees that they would. And because we were working very closely with Mr. Tambo, I phoned him. He came to Stockholm to nod, and they gave me the money. But I want to tell you about a very interesting thing that happened on that occasion. Another friend of mine, Reverend Andrew Young, who had previously come to this country to see me when I was a congressman with Asha Eth, the Wimbledon champion, he happened to be in Stockholm at the same time as I was there. So he was told that I was there and he wanted to see me. But then Dr. Michanek spoke out of his turn, because he then said that you won't only see Buthelezi, you'll also see Mr. Tambo. But Mr. Tambo did not want us to be seen together like that.
Why?
So a lie was told.
Did he ever tell you why?
Mr. Tambo never came to Stockholm. I had lunch with Reverend Andrew Young in the dining room. Mr. Tambo's lunch was served in a tray in a bedroom. And then, of course, in 1979, Mr. Tambo, again as my leader, said I must come to London with a delegation of Inkatha. And for 2 days, we discussed two issues: the issue of economic sanctions against South Africa and the issue of the armed struggle. So, of course, I could not agree. We could not agree. I had a delegation of about 16 people. And Bishop Alpheus Zulu was asked by Mr. Tambo to chair that meeting between us. So Mr. Tambo was supposed to come back to me in December, because this was in November. But he never came back to me. And then there was a journalist by the name of Suzanne Vos, who was the chief of the Sunday Times Bureau in London. He splashed in the Sunday Times that Buthelezi and Tambo met in London. So Mr. Tambo, unfortunately, accused me of leaking that. But in fact, Suzanne had been informed by Mr. Cap Zungu, who was a son of one of our Anglican clergy in Claremont in Durban, who represented the ANC. It was not myself. So Mr. Tambo issued a statement denying, in fact, that the meeting took place at all. You see, he denied it altogether.
Why do you think he denied having meetings with you? Why do you think he didn't want, were the reasons he didn't want you,
of the ANC,
the two of you to be seen together?
Launched a scathing attack on me, and after that the sluice gates were opened. I was then denigrated, vilified all over the world, and denigrated as a lack of the government, and etc. And that's the poison that is full in the heads of many people who were not even born at that time.
Where do you think the narrative that you were a sellout came from?
Pardon?
Where do you think the narrative that you were a sellout came from? And why do you think Oliver Tambo never wanted to be seen in public with you, and even denied having meetings with you?
If you don't want to accept these facts, in fact, during that time, Mr. Mandela, who was not only my leader but my friend, communicated with me. Even during that time when Tambo and others did that, we never clashed. Madiba sent messages to me, and he wrote to me in 1989 asking that the two of us must actually address the shameful black-on-black violence that was brought about by the People's War of the ANC. In fact, when Madiba was released, he wanted to, I made it a non-negotiable. When Mr. de Klerk asked me to negotiate that, I would never, under any circumstances, be involved in any negotiation with the government unless Mr. Mandela and other political leaders of other parties and exiles like Mr. Tambo returned. That was done by me. In fact, here in Cape Town in Parliament in 1990, when he announced the release of Mr. Mandela in Parliament, I'm the only person that Mr. de Klerk mentioned by name as having assisted him to make that decision to release Mr. Mandela, by the way, whom I had for a long time been campaigning for his release, to the extent that when he held the big rally in Durban, when he said, throw your guns and things into the sea, when he said that, he thanked me publicly and Inkatha for having campaigned for his release. Then, of course, somehow we're going to meet, but this didn't happen. But then Mr. Madiba then visited the Transkei. Then Amakosi asked him, you and Buthelezi are known to be very close friends. Have you met? He said no, because the United Democratic Front, which by the way was launched here in Cape Town in 1983, in their very first statement, they said there would be an umbrella for all organizations that were anti-government, except Inkatha. They said Inkatha was not welcome. I don't know why. I had not even asked for that. So when Madiba was released then, he said that, when Makos asked him why he hadn't met with me, he said the UDF and leaders of the ANC almost throttled him. Then we were not to meet with Madiba until the 29th of January 1991 in Durban, in a hotel, with a delegation of the ANC, a delegation of Inkatha. We spent the whole day talking. And in our joint communique, we described at that meeting was our former president, Mr. Mbeki. And on our side was Walt Felgate. And we decided to address the shameful black-on-black violence. Madiba and myself were to address joint rallies of Inkatha and the ANC. So then I was invited to a place near Maritzburg called Taylor's Halt. Then I invited Madiba to go with me to have the first joint meeting. He agreed with alacrity, if I may say. And then, of course, just a few days before, Dr. Oscar Dloma, our Secretary General, informed me that Madiba was not longer going with me. So I phoned Madiba. I said, Madiba, is it true that we're no longer going together? He said, man, you don't know what happened. So I said, Madiba, what happened? He said, the leader of the ANC in your province, Natal as it was then, and the leader of the Southern Communist Party, Mr. Herikwala, brought a bus load of all the leaders of the ANC from KZN to say under no circumstances should you go with Buthelezi to Taylor's Hold. So we never did this. So it was not until, in fact, Mr. Mbeki, then negotiations took place, then there's an interim constitution, then the interim constitution prescribed that, you know, any party that had more than 5% would have a place in the cabinet. Then Madiba invited me to be his Minister of Home Affairs. Then I was that minister. Then we're in Mauritius for a SADC conference. Then I'm suddenly called to Madiba's room in the hotel. Then Madiba says to me, you know, Shanga, from here I'm going to America, when he went there for the first time. And he said, he mentioned it by name, our Southern President. He said, and Tambo is in the Far East. So I'm leaving the country with you. Of course, they were furious. They were furious because that's the extent to which Madiba actually, trusted me. But Mr. Mbeki went even further. In 1999, the people at Thokoza, a lot of killings had taken place in Thokoza between the ANC and Inkatha and Thokoza in Gauteng. So the people there got together, Inkatha and the ANC, and they built a monument, and they wanted Madiba and I to come for its official unveiling. But Madiba, of course, was very busy. So until 1999, there was an election now, and Mr. Mbeki invited me to Oliver Tambo's house in Pretoria. He then said to me, Shanga, I know that the thing that was in the first constitution, the interim constitution, that we can have a government of national unity, has expired now. But I think that for the sake of consolidating our reconciliation, I want us to continue to work together. And I want to go further. I want you to appoint you as the Deputy President of South Africa. So, in fact, after the election, he invited me again to Oliver Tambo house. He actually appointed me. But then, to my surprise, my president, Mr. Mbeki, said to me, you see those chairs, Chair? I said, yes. He said, leaders of the ANC from KwaZulu-Natal were sitting here this morning. And they said that if I'm giving you the position of Deputy President of the Republic, then you must give the premiership, which was held by the IFE in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, must give it to the ANC. Of course, that was impossible for me, so I said I could not do that. But then Mr. Mbeki still insisted that we must continue to work together. He said that I must still be in his cabinet, in spite of the people torpedoing this thing. Of course, I was told that our former president had been going round because my colleague, Joe Matthews, had told me when he was the deputy to Mr. Mafumahadi that Mr. Mafumahadi told him that Mr. Zuma had been taking rounds talking to the leaders of the ANC, saying that he has heard that Mr. Mbeki is appointing me, but he wants to hold that position himself. So then this idea of saying that I must offer the premiership was actually meant to torpedo that. So then, therefore, I said, I said, I'm prepared to serve under him. He then said that, I said, any position. Then Mr. Mbeki said, no, I'll appoint you again as Minister of Home Affairs. Now, to go back to your question, did Madiba did he ever look like someone who needed his head read, or Mr. Mbeki? If I was a sellout, as you have been repeating now on television, why would they want to sully, this country and the history of all the leaders of this country by appointing a sellout and even wanting him to be the deputy president of the country? That's my answer to your question, where you repeat the vilification of me and say, am I a sellout? If a people says I'm a swine, do I become a swine? I don't turn into a pig. I mean, that thing which you are repeating, you know, that is a narrative that I was a sellout. You know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't rub off any skin off my nose at all, because I know that God knows, and you know, and everyone knows that, you know, I'm not a sellout. I'm not a descendant of cowards. My grandfather, King Techoya, was a prisoner here in Cape Town, and that made me a South African. And all the lies that I told that I wanted to break away and so on are lies to try to vilify me. You know, my grandfather, Matole, was my father. His father was Mkandumba. Mkandumba, on the 22nd of January 1879, he fought when the British army was defeated at San Juan. So I don't come from a line. And all the Zulu kings, my grandfather, King Tinizulu, was exiled to the island of St. Helena. And during the Pambata rebellion, he was again defenestrated, and he was convicted of treason, because Inkosi Pambata brought his wife Siyegiwe to the residence of my grandfather during when he was conducting the fight during the Zulu rebellion of 1906. I don't come from a line of cowards. From both my father's and my mother's line of ascendants, we fought, and I've done my bit, and I'm not ashamed of anything I did. If I were to be asked to walk again this path, I would walk this step, because even the issue of economic sanctions, which I opposed it because, you know, it was going to impoverish the already very poor people in South Africa. In fact, I went to the capitals of the world. I went to see the Prime Minister. I went to see the Chancellor in Germany. I went to see the presidents of the United States, Carter, Bush, Reagan, to say that the multinational companies should not withdraw. When Msholozi was our president, you know that even during the funeral of His Excellency President Mugabe, it was suggested that these sanctions against Zimbabwe should be lifted. So I asked Msholozi. He said that the ANC and the government are against sanctions against Zimbabwe. I said, Msholozi, why are you against them? He said, because the poor people would suffer. So I said, but Msholozi, you people vilified me and called me all sorts of names for that. Those sanctions were the very foundation of the poverty and the lack of jobs that we see today. But at the same time, I'm prepared to say that the sanctions did contribute to our liberation. In as much as I did not also, what you call, approve of the armed struggle. But I say that that threat of violence by Umkhonto Wesizwe contributed to our liberation. Because in London, when we did not agree with Mr. Tambo, I suggested that we should have a multi-strategy approach where each one, where he is, must do what he's doing. And the cumulative effect of everything that we did individually would cause the cookie to crumble, as the Americans would say, would achieve our liberation. I said we'd go back to the table, as the founding fathers said in 1912, that after so many wars and so much bloodshed, the liberation of the country would be solved by getting around the negotiating table and talking, as happened. You know, I know that at one time Madiba was also being slandered. Some people saying that in jail he has actually sold out, because Madiba started talking to Minister Kutsi and so on and others, you know, again about the thing. And some people were saying that Madiba is sold out. Now, I mean, actually the founding fathers in 1912, actually, their strategy actually was the one that achieved our freedom at last.
Now, interesting views there on sanctions and the armed struggle. In its final report, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission found that the IFP was responsible for gross violations of human rights. And the Commission based its findings, among other things, on speeches that you gave, which the Commission said had the effect of inciting supporters of the IFP to commit violence. Do you regret that?
Look, sir, as far as I'm concerned, it's a fact of history. Even yesterday, there was an article by Ms. Carol Patton, when he talked about the Green Book, when he talked about the senior leaders of the ANC going to Vietnam to learn how to conduct a people's war through MK, which was going to be unleashed against white minority, which was turned on us. The honest thing I said to my people, I said that according to our jurisprudence, we have an inalienable right to defend yourselves and your loved ones. I said so. That's all. So there was violence, there was counter-violence, then there was preemptive violence. That thing gained its own momentum. It was not orchestrated by me. Many painful things took place. You know, actually at the TRC, I said I asked for forgiveness for whatever members of Inkatha did during that time. But I was not saying that I'm admitting guilt. In fact, the president of the ANC at that time asked for a blanket amnesty without disclosing what they did. You know, I never asked for any amnesty. I said that I would not ask for any amnesty because I never orchestrated, you know, any violence that took place. And I never, in fact, ordered or ratified the killing of any single person. This thing gained its own momentum, and I was very sad that we in Inkatha, and that is why I apologize to the people of South Africa, which I repeat even now, that apology.
Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, thank you very much for your time this evening. That was the founder and former leader of Inkatha Freedom Party, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi.